Naka-mute pala ako. Maligayang araw po. Yan, sandali tanggalin lang natin yung comments ko. Yung aking comment. Okay. Pag-usapan natin ngayon, tree tableau uli. And how the tree tableau has paved the way for the age of artificial general intelligence. The age of information communication technology. Yan. Meanwhile, tingnan muna natin yung ating mga sagot. Sagot saan? Sagot dun sa ating Mentimeter. Importante yung mga tanong natin eh. So, yung mga sagot natin ito. I know the difference between artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. In principle, dapat ay alam ninyo yan kasi yan ang age ninyo. Pero pag-usapan natin, i-introduce nga natin kayong lahat eh. This is the age. Ay naku, sorry. Naloko na, hindi ko pala naayos. Pakisagot nga uli. Hindi ko naayos eh. Yan, audience space ha. Nilagay ko na audience space. Sige, magkukwento muna ako habang sinasagot ng iba yan. Pakisagot nga uli. Yan. Nagkamali eh. So, Siyam nagsabi disagree, ibig sabihin hindi nila alam yung difference between artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. Meron pakiramdam nila kasi based on the term general siguro mararamdaman nyo na yung pagkakaiba eh. So, this is the 20th century pioneer of artificial intelligence. Marami nagsabi both of them. 3 nagsabi si Alan Turing, 1 nagsabi si Claude Shannon. Ganare. Si Claude Shannon, sa totoo lang, napaka-importante na ibinigay niya. In fact, meron akong gustong panoodin ninyo na film ni Claude Shannon eh. Mamaya, pag may oras tayo, papapanood ko sa inyo. Noong 1952, gumawa siya ng artificially intelligent na mouse robot, na nahahanap niya yung way out of a maze. Ibang klase. But in principle, silang dalawa, si Alan Turing at si Claude Shannon, ang pioneer talaga ng artificial intelligence. So, ulitin natin na in principle, silang dalawa. Kaso, hindi sikat si Claude Shannon eh, for some reason. In fact, dapat nanalo siya ng Nobel Prize, but he never got the Nobel Prize. Kasi in the first place, wala namang Nobel Prize sa information technology. Wala rin namang Nobel Prize para sa philosophy, doon siya parehong may contribution. Wala rin namang Nobel Prize for engineering, meron sa physics. So, hindi siya nabigyan ng Nobel Prize. But anyway, si Alan Turing sikat, saka na natin pag-usapan. But in principle, let me repeat in principle, silang dalawa ang pioneer ng artificial intelligence. Pero, most academics would just tell you that si Alan Turing talaga yon. Bakit? Kasi meron siyang published paper on it na sumikat. Hindi kagaya ng mga paper ni Claude Shannon, hindi naman sumikat. So, babalikan natin yan. So, pag ako tinanong ninyo, both of them. Pero pag tinignan nyo sa Wikipedia at saka sa kung anong mga encyclopedia, sasabihin si Alan Turing. In theory, artificial intelligence is not possible, only approximation of it is. 3 nag-agree, 4 ang not sure, 6 ang disagree. In other words, yung 6 sinasabi, in theory, artificial general intelligence is actually possible. Okay, sa totoo lang, yun ang pinaliwanag ni Alan Turing doon sa kanyang paper. Paper niya nung bago siya namatay. I am familiar with GPT-3. Isa lang ang familiar, siguro engineering student yan, baka geek na walang girlfriend, walang ginagawa kundi magbasa. Alright. GP3 passes Turing's test. Ay una, dapat alam ninyo kung anong Turing's test. 'Pag hindi niyo alam yung Turing's test, ay di pero kung alam ninyo si Turing naman yung, pioneer ng artificial intelligence, eh, siguro yung kanyang test ay may kinalaman sa artificial intelligence. And therefore, kung merong artificially intelligent, system ngayon, ay baka yun ibig sabihin kaya not sure kayo ano. Tama naman. Yan, hanggang diyan lang tayo. Balikan natin yung ating usapan. Medyo tagilid ngayon yung aking, StreamYard. Hindi pa ako nakakabayad, wala pa akong pambayad. Alam niyo kaysa may 'pag ganito ano, warning ko sa inyo ha, 'pag next meeting hindi pa ako nakakabayad ng StreamYard ko. Bakit? Kasi yung ibabayad ko sa StreamYard ko, itutulong ko na lang dun sa mga taong nangangailangan ng tulong ngayon. Ang gagawin natin next meeting ay Google Meet muna tayo. Google Meet, walang bayad, Gagamitin natin, So warning, next meeting pagka ako'y walang pera at ako'y imbis na nagbayad ng StreamYard ay may tinulungan, sa dami naman ng aking kailangang tulungan, ay, maggo-Google Meet muna tayo. But, meanwhile, StreamYard pa rin, hindi pa naman pinuputol. Okay. Maligayang araw, Miss Carrido, Miss Aquino, Miss Santiago, Mr. Locsin, Miss Wansing, Miss Blas, Miss Jimenez, Mr. Singson, Soria, and everybody else. Ang dami. Okay. Balik tayo sa usapan natin, Review tayo ng kaunti. Yan. Okay, pinag-aralan natin alin? Sandali, balik tayo din, Pinag-aralan natin si Charles Sanders Peirce. Ito, Charles Sanders Peirce. Bakit? Kasi sabi nga ni Charles Sanders Peirce, between the sentence, halimbawa, natatandaan, between the sentence P and Q and a circuit involving a series, remember circuit, gumawa tayo ng circuit, kunyari meron dining bumbilya, tama? Medyo tagilid lang yung bumbilya natin, kunyari lang, circuit. Tatandaan, merong analogy between such a sentence P and Q and such a series circuit with switches P and Q. Natatandaan nyo, sabi ni Charles Sanders Peirce, this is only true when both components are true. It's just like saying this is only on when both switches are on. Yan. Yan ang paliwanag ni Charles Sanders Peirce. Pero sinasabi rin ni Charles Sanders Peirce na pwede naman, instead of saying P and Q, you have the expression P or Q. Ay, mali. P or Q, which is just like expressing, which is just like expressing what? Sandali. Expressing, this is only false when both statements are false. And when you say that, this is just like expressing some parallel circuitry. Di ba? Pinaliwanag natin yan. Yan. As if to say, the light is only off. The light is only off when switch P and switch Q are both off. Yan. Yun ang sinasabi ni Charles Sanders Peirce, ano? And so on and so forth. And by the time you know it, alam na natin yan, nire-review ko lang. By the time you know it, sinasabi ni Charles Sanders Peirce, ang importante lang talaga sa mathematical logic ay yung mga sumusunod na logical constant. Sa modern symbolic logic, 5 ang logical constants and, or, material implication, material equivalence, negation. Pero ang suggestion ni Charles Sanders Peirce ay hindi na kailangan ang material implication kasi meron ka ng not P or Q expression. Hindi na rin kailangan ang material equivalence precisely because this is already available. And so, ang importante lang ay ito, at ito, tatlong logical constant, 1, 2, and 3. Yan. So, salamat yan kanino kay Charles Sanders Peirce noong 1890s tsaka early 1900s. Inile-lecture na yan sa kanyang mga estudyante sa philosophy at logic. Dahil si Raulo nga si Charles Sanders Peirce, summa cum laude, graduate ng chemistry, Harvard University, pagkatapos po tayo na itinuro philosophy, wala namang kwarta dyan. Una-una, wala namang kwarta sa pagtuturo. Sira. Yan. Ngayon, sabi natin, dahil doon sa ginawa ni Charles Sanders Peirce, ay may mga development na nangyari. Pero, iwanan muna natin si Charles Sanders Peirce. Balik tayo dun sa sinasabi natin earlier. Anong sinasabi natin earlier? Sabi natin earlier, mas magandang gamitin ang shortcut method dahil nga may limitation ang natural deduction. Pag ginamitan to ng shortcut method, sasabihin natin, let us presume the argument to be invalid. So, all premises are true. Conclusion false. Yan. And dahil nga dyan sa shortcut method, para mas madali, sabi natin, true ay better expressed as 1, false better expressed as 0. Para gana rin nga ang sitwasyon, madaling ipakita. Now, if I and J are true, then that means both I and J are true. But then, if I is true and G and I is false, then G must be false. If G is false, no matter what H is, G and H must be false. If G and H are false, E cannot be true, E must be false. If E is false, E and F cannot be true, it must be false. If E and F is false, then B or D must be false, which means B is false and D is false. If D is false, then C must be false. If C here is false and I or C is true, then A must be true. But B we already know is false. If B is false, then A must be false. And so you end up with A being both false and true or true and false at the same time. That means to presume invalid is absurd. We cannot presume this invalid because every time you presume invalid, you end up with some kind of contradiction. which means we cannot presume invalid, which means the argument is valid, and that is the shortcut method, ano? Ngayon, focus your attention here. True is 1, F is 0. Okay, so there you go. Pinag-aralan natin shortcut method. Now, sabi natin, yung shortcut method may advantage kasi short. Of course, kaya nga shortcut method eh. Kaso, sabi natin, ang original na gusto nating mangyari, salamat sa mga Greeks and their concept of harmony and therefore later coherence, gusto natin between our thoughts expressed as sentences and therefore expressed as principles or rules that we put together so that we survive with better chances. You know, if you know the rule, whenever the sun rises, it rises from the east, you have better chances of survival. If you know for all free falling bodies, F equals ma, you have better chances of survival. If you know pressure times volume equals nRT, you have more chances of survival. But then, understanding of coherence, remember, pinag-usapan natin, understanding of coherence requires understanding of contradictions. And why are we interested in coherence? Because remember, precisely we are interested in our wisdom so that we can predict. We remember truths and we remember rules that are reliable, especially tautologies, because they enable us to predict. These rules we remember in our minds, and the more coherent these rules are, the more we can predict. The more coherent these rules are, the more we can predict. But then, the more contradictions you have, the less coherence you have, the less you can predict. And so, we need to identify what contradicts what among our thoughts. But then when you identify which contradicts what, we have a problem. Why? Because to identify what contradicts what, you need to relate them. You need to connect them to one another. No understanding of connection, no understanding of contradiction. In other words, we know the value of how our thoughts connect to one another. The more we can see how our thoughts connect to one another, the more we can see what contradicts what. That's the point. The more we can see what connects what, then the more we can identify whether our thoughts are coherent or not, and therefore the more we can predict. So, interesado tayo sa connections. And what now? Okay, ano ngayon ang ibig sabihin niyan? Ang ibig sabihin niyan, kung natatandaan nyo. Sabi natin, ang shortcut method ay ano? Ang shortcut method may advantage. Anong advantage ng shortcut method? Ang advantage ng shortcut method, short. Siyempre, ano? Ay, mali. Ang spelling, talaga naman. Okay. However, sabi natin, may advantage ang natural deduction. Because with natural deduction, you get to see many connections. Kasi maraming steps involved. And maraming statements involved. And all those statements involve logical constants and therefore connections. So, may advantage ang shortcut method, may advantage ang natural deduction. Ang gusto nating mangyari, yung advantage ng shortcut method at saka advantage ng natural deduction magsama. And when we combine them, the result is, of course, as we now know, kung natatandaan nyo, ay ano, the Tree Tableaux Method. Yan. Kung gusto nating mapagsama ang advantages na yan, naimbento yung Tree Tableaux Method. Okay. Gusto ko lamang kayong tanungin ha. Miss Carrido, nasusundan pa ba po ang review? Yan. Pakisagot ha, Miss Carrido. Yan. Dali, iinom lang ako ha. Balik din eh. So, naimbento ang Tree Tableaux at ari nga ang ating halimbawa, ano? Yung kung meron kang argument na ganere, unang gagawin mo, ita-transform mo into a system where you only have 3 logical constants. Kasi remember dito, you have 5 logical constants. Alright. Pero dito, you have 3 logical constants. Now, ang sabi ni Charles Sanders Peirce, ito lang ang importante, 3 logical constants. Okay. So, excuse me. When you have that, what now? Well, when you have that, then you can apply now your Tree Tableaux method. You presume the argument invalid, and what happens? Well, here it is. You presume the argument invalid, and then you go on seeing what's the result of your assumption. Okay. Ulitin natin. If you presume your argument invalid, halimbawa dito, ano? Let's presume this invalid here. And this is what you get. As you presume invalid, you end up with contradictions everywhere. Natatandaan nyo ito. Ginawa natin to eh. Yan. 100%, 8 of the 8 possibilities that you presume the argument invalid, you end up with a contradiction. You see, if you presume invalid, remember, if you presume invalid, you are saying this is true, 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 and this is false. But then if that is false, that means you're presuming the negation of the conclusion is true. You're presuming this is true. Now, if that is true, you're presuming this statement here is consistent. That's the word, consistent with all the premises. And if you say they are consistent, they are all true. And so when you're saying they are all true as in here, then these are the results. And as we pointed out, lumalabas lahat sila, they end up with contradiction, lahat ng branches. Of course, as you can see, precisely kaya Tree Tableaux mukha siyang puno. Ano? Ito yung roots. Parang imagine ito, paso. Ito yung paso. Ito yung puno. Yan. Di ba? Ulitin natin. Ito yung paso. Yan. Ito yung main trunk. Ito yung puno. And all of these are your branches. Kaya Tree Tableaux. Yan. Okay. So, nung pinagsama ang advantage ng shortcut method at natural deduction method, yan ang nangyari. Naimbento ang naimbento ang, Tree Tableaux Method. Okey. Tanggalin na natin 'to, ha. Naku, mag-e-erase pa ako, sandali. Kahit naman are. Okey, just a moment. Inom muna kayo ng tubig habang naghihintay kayo din, eh. Yikes! Kaliit naman ng eraser na rin, nakakainis. Sandali lang po, sandali lang. Un momento, por favor. Yan. Hala, puwede na, kahit hindi perpekto. Okey. So, ito ngayon ang nangyari, ano, naimbento ang salamat kay, Charles Sanders Peirce, naimbento yung Tree Tableaux Method. Kailan yan? 1890s at saka early 1900s. Nagkataon naman na nung 1890s ay simula na rin ang maraming development sa physics and therefore simula na rin ang maraming innovations na may kinalaman sa technology. Isa dun sa innovations ay yung pagkakaimbento ng wireless radio. Wireless radio, yan. Now, yung wireless radio nangangailangan ng ano, ng, amplifiers. Nangangailangan ng amplifiers. Yung amplifiers, they literally amplify radio signals. Kasi pagka ang radio signal, halimbawa, meron kaming ganari sa Candelaria, mas malaki diyan. Yung sa Candelaria, Quezon. Yung aming, grandfather radio sa Candelaria, Quezon, merong merong vacuum tubes. Kaya lang mas old model. Ito, itong mga ito, ang tawag diyan vacuum tube amplifiers. Yang vacuum tube amplifiers na yan, itong mga naka-display na 'to, that's about mga 2.5 to 3 inches. Pero yung grandfather radio namin na ganun kalaki, parang kung ako, yan ano, ay ganun kalaki yung grandfather radio, yan. Parang ganyan ano. Yan, anyway, the point is, yung grandfather radio na original, ang vacuum tube, siguro mga 6 inches ang laki, ganito kalaki. 6 inches. Tapos it's also made of glass kagaya nung pinakita nating litrato. And what it does, kung merong maliit na signal na makukuha, lalabas na mas malaking signal. Kaya nga amplifier ang tawag. Ngayon, kung kailangan mo ng mas malaki pang signal and dun sa aming radyo ay, may apat na amplifiers, mas palalakihin pa yan. Pero kung kulang pa yan, then you add more amplifiers at mas lalaki pa yung signal, yan. So yan ang ginagawa ano, nag-a-amplify. Excuse me. Pero notice, amplifiers, sabi ng mga engineers, are also forms of automated switches. Naipakita yan ng mga engineers, huwag na nating pag-usapan kung papaano. Yan daw mga amplifiers ay ano, automated switches. Bakit kamo? Kasi yung isang amplifier, may dalawang direksyon na pwedeng pasukan ng kuryente, eh. Yan, okay, so erase uli natin 'to. Yung amplifier, Bakit automated switches? Kasi ganun eh, kung meron kang amplifier, yung amplifier mo puwedeng sa kaliwa galing yung kuryente, puwedeng sa kanan galing yung kuryente, yung current. Pagka ganyan ang nangyari, ganito ang mangyayari. Halimbawa, meron kang machine, say, meron kang motor dito ano, kunyari lang motor. Yung motor mo na yan, nagpapatakbo ng isang conveyor belt. Ayan, kunyari lang ano, conveyor belt. Ngayon yung motor mo na yan nakakabit sa isang switch, yan. Kunyari nakakabit dun sa switch. Now this is the point, kung ang motor mo ay kailangan ng 220 volts at yung amplifier mo ay nandito, treated as an automated switch, ang papasok ay 110 volts, 110 volts, ang lumabas ay 220 volts. Eh, kailangan mo nga ng 220 volts, eh di practically you're saying naka-on yung machinery mo. Pero kung dito naman galing from left to right, pumasok ay malaking current, ang lumabas ay maliit na current, sabihin na natin ang pumasok na current ay 220 volts at ang lumabas ay 110 volts or maybe even lower. Pagka 110 lang, practically saying, naka-off yung iyong machinery. It's an analogy to being on and off. Hindi naman siya literally on and off, pero analogy na on and off switch. Yan. So you can either turn the machine off by coming up with lower voltage or turn the machine on by coming up with the voltage you need. Now for on, let's write 1. For off, let's write 0. Yan. So remember, true is 1, false is 0, on is 1, off is 0. Yan. Okay? Ngayon, ito yung sinasabi natin. Ano yung sinasabi natin, ha? Teka muna, erase natin 'to. Mahirap mag-erase mamaya, eh. Anong kinalaman niyan do'n sa tree tableau? Yan. Wala, gusto ko lang magkuwento. Eto ngayon, So may automated switch tayo ano? May automated switch, yung amplifier. Ngayon, nagkataon na, erase na natin si Charles Sanders Peirce. Ay hindi, wag muna. Sige na nga, erase na natin. Nagkataon naman na si Henry Ford, umimbento ng isang industrial system na nakaka-produce sila ng 1,000,000 cars a year. 1,000,000 cars a year. Oh, eh, anong kinalaman niyan sa usapan natin? Wala, gusto ko lang sabihin magaling si Henry Ford. 1,000,000 cars per year. Now imagine mo 1,000,000 cars per year ang pino-produce mo. Remember, wala pang artificial intelligence noon. So, yung 1,000,000 cars involve tens of thousands of laborers, tens of thousands of engineers, and you involve literally hundreds of thousands of switches, and you involve tens of thousands of generator sets. So, na-imagine yung factory producing 1,000,000 cars a year. Hindi biro. Now, problema yan ng mga engineers. That's an engineering problem. Sabihin na lang natin na may 1,000 kang generator sets at kaya 1,000 kasi ang generator sets hindi puwedeng tumatakbo ng 24 hours a day lalo na nung panahon na yun. So, yung generator mo papapagpahingahin mo at aayusin mo et cetera. Sabihin na lang natin na on a single day, 500 sa 1,000 generator sets, 500 ang naka-on, 500 ang naka-off. Or, ang problema mo kung 500 naka-on, 500 naka-off, ano yung combination? Pagka nagkasabay-sabay na naka-on sila or sumobra lang na isa o dalawa, masusunog yung buong circuit mo. Yan ang problema. So, tingin kayo din ano? So, meron kang malaking-malaking factory na libo-libo ang tao, pagkatapos ang daming generators. Din sa part na rin, may gana ring generator sa part na rin, et cetera. Ngayon, lahat sila magkakakabit. Ngayon, pagka nagkasabay-sabay o sumobra ng isa, dalawa, tatlo, apat, out of 500, imbis na 500 lang naka-on at ang naka-on mo ay 530, masunog yung maraming places kasi mag-o-over yung generation. Yan, salamat Mr. Singson, Mr. Miranda, kung nasusundan pa nga, okay, Miss Garrido. Ganito, merong listahan yung mga engineer na ngayong araw na ito, ngayong oras na ito, naka-on yung generator na ito naka-off, ito naka-on, ito naka-off. Eh kung may 500, pwede kang magkamali. Halimbawa, nabatukan ka ng asawa mo. Bakit? Ay hindi mo natapos yung iyong labada. Ay di mainit ang ulo mo. Pagpasok mo ng opisina, ay mainit ang ulo mo, nagkamali ka ng isa. Dahil doon sa isa may namatay. Bakit? Ay may janitor naglilinis doon sa oven ng pintura ng mga kotse. Ay dapat ay naka-off yung oven, ay pumasok yung janitor, nagwawalis doon, biglang nag-on ng oven, naluto yung janitor ko, kawawa naman, pardon the expression. So, dapat perpekto yung coordination ng on and off ng switch. Eh, kailangan foolproof. Ibig sabihin, miski loko, miski gago, miski tanga, ay hindi magkakamali. So, foolproof. Eh, para maging foolproof, kailangan ay ang may hawak ng listahan ay graduate ng industrial engineering at summa cum laude. May listahan lang ang hawak ay summa cum laude pa. Ay kailangang matalino, pero kahit matalino nagkakamali eh. So yun ang problema sa graduate school ng engineering ng MIT. MIT doon sa Makati, Mapua Institute of Technology. Ganun eh. Dito, so may problema gawa nga ng pagpo-produce ng mga kotseng yan. In demand sa buong mundo eh, at saka sa United States. Dito pumasok si Claude Shannon. Si Claude Shannon ay master's degree student noong 1930s. Master's degree student noong 1930s sa Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Ang ginawa ni Claude Shannon, napakasimple. Sabi ni Claude Shannon, ay meron na tayong tree tableau. Yan. Okay, may tree tableau na tayo. Meron tayong Morse code. Yan. At ano pa, ganito muna, sa Morse code, Morse code meron tayong dit at dot. Ay mali, sorry. Dit, dot. Pagka magmo-Morse code ka, meron dit, dot. dot, you know what I'm talking about. Okay? Ngayon, in other words, your alphabets are expressed in terms of dot signals. Okay? Now, pwede nating sabihin na ganito. Pwede nating sabihin na yung dit mo ay 1, yung dot mo ay 0. So you have dit, dot, you have on, o, you have true, false. Yan, ano? Yan, okay? Dit, dot, on, off, true, false. And you have only one language, a language where you have only 2 letters, 1 and 0. Okay? The digits 1 and 0. Yan, okay? Now, hindi natapos ang usapan dyan, ano? Bakit? May isa pang dapat tayong tandaan. Ano isa pa dapat nating tandaan? Dali ha. Isa pa nating dapat tandaan. Remember, meron tayong isang geek na importante sa buhay natin na hanapin natin. Sino ba yun? Naku, nawala. Ay, nawala yung geek ko. Browse. Anyway. You remember Bertrand Russell? Dali ha. Wiki. Media Commons. Oh. Dali lang. Ayaw kong makalimutan ninyo eh. So, panoodin natin ha. Okay. Ano ba naman to? Anyway. Natatandaan nyo si Bertrand Russell. Ano isang contribution ni Bertrand Russell? Sabi ni Bertrand Russell, out of logical theory, represented by your rules of inference and rules of replacement, you can derive all the principles of mathematics, style geometry. At yan na nga ang pinatunayan niya, inverted pyramid system parang sa geometry with your axioms in the form of your rules of inference and rules of replacement, you derive all the rules of mathematics. Pinakita niya yan dun sa kanyang Principia Mathematica. One of the implications of Principia Mathematica is this, that you can actually, okay, ulitin natin ha. So, pinaalala ko lang, yung kinontribute ni Bertrand Russell. One of the implications is this. You can actually reconcile your arguments with mathematics. Yun ang implication nun. Dahil doon sa inverted pyramid system, unification of mathematics ni Bertrand Russell, matatandaan, sinabi ko nga, with your rules of inference and rules of replacement, you can derive all the rules of mathematics into a single system. You can derive all the rules of mathematics, ergo unifying mathematics into a single system. But this means your arguments, which are expressed in your common language form, are compatible, they can be reconciled with your mathematics, with your mathematical expressions, with numbers. Yan. So, salamat kay Bertrand Russell, we have that background in our mind. At 'yan ang isa sa mga influences ni excuse me, ni Claude Shannon. Now sa mga tuwid ganito, sabi ni Claude Shannon, "If you have a truth table like this, for each section of the truth table, you will express your your sentences, your letters in terms of 1 and 0. And that they are true can be expressed in terms of 1 or 0. The letters themselves, 1 or 0, kasi dit dat, remember, Morse code. And then he is also saying na for them to be true or false, negated or not negated, can be expressed in the form of automated switches called vacuum tubes. Yan. So, sa madaling sabi, yung technology ng vacuum tubes plus technology ng mathematical logic in the form of the tree tableau plus yung technology ng Morse code and ancient technology na arithmetic, pinagsama-sama niya, you end up with what we today call circuit boards. Circuit boards. Yung master's degree ni Claude Shannon sa MIT ito. Yung master's degree niya, pinakita niya, if you can see this, okay? Ito yon. Pinakita niya yung application ng Tree Tableaux in the form of circuit boards. Circuit boards that can be used for automated switching on and off of thousands of switches. Yan. Ayan o, tingnan nyo to. Oh. Di ba ito yung pinapaliwanag ni Charles Sanders Peirce? Oh. Ito yung series. Ito yung parallel. Oh. And so on and so forth. So pag binasa ninyo itong master's degree thesis ni Claude Shannon, ito yun. Symbolic analysis from what? Modern symbolic logic and relay of, or the symbolic analysis of relay ng mga switches sa factory, and switching circuits by Claude Elwood Shannon, Bachelor of Science, University of Michigan. Saan? Sa Michigan Institute of Technology. Galing, ano? Nagsama-sama. So, na-invento ang circuit board. Yung original na circuit board, sila laki ng lamesa. Kunyari, ito yung lamesa mo, table mo. Doon sa table mo, merong tree tableau. Yung mga tree tableau, merong mga, at every junction, merong mga automated switches. But the automated switches are your vacuum tubes. Yung original na circuit board ni Claude Shannon, kung di ako nagkakamali, apat lamang na vacuum tubes representing the four possibilities: true, false, true, false, false, true, false, false. Remember sa truth table natin, pag dadalawa lamang ang iyong variables. If you have two variables, then you have only 4 rows. And when you have 4 rows, you have 4 possibilities: true, 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 false, false, true, false, false. So, meron kang circuit board na may input. Sandali ha. Meron ang circuit board kunyari ito table size na circuit board, dine may switch, tapos dine may vacuum tube, dine may vacuum tube, dine may vacuum tube, dine may vacuum tube. And then given the switches, you have many possibilities. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. In other words, possibilities ng ito naka-on, ito naka-off, ito naka-on, ito naka-off. You know what I'm talking about? Or lahat sila naka-on, or and so on and so forth. The point is, with circuit boards, possible na yung automated switching, wala nang masusunog dun sa factory mo. Ngayon, dito pumasok si Alan Turing. So, by 1936, na-imbento na yung circuit board. At by that time, sikat na yan. Okay. By that time, sikat na yan. Ngayon, dito pumasok si si Alan Turing. Si Alan Turing nagsulat ng paper. Sabi niya, imagine mo, meron kang hindi lang isang, kasi ang circuit board, very simple eh. Pwedeng ang isang circuit board can represent modus ponens, That's it. Or pwede ang circuit board mo can represent modus tollens. That's it. Pero sabi ni Claude Shannon, kung meron ang circuit board na dalawang possibilities ng output, kabitan mo ng another circuit board at another circuit board at another circuit board, sabihin mo na ng walang katapusan yung mga circuit board mong magkakasama. So, yung dalawa mo naging 4, yung 4 mo naging 8, yung 8 mo naging 16, and so on and so forth. In other words, imagine an array of many circuit boards. Now, pag pinatakbo niyo imagination niyo, parang ang sinasabi ni Claude Shannon, this is not only about switches. This is about the possibility of a universal machine. Yan, yung concept na universal machine, inspired yan ng mga naunang mga works na binanggit natin. Simple lang ang sinasabi ni Claude Shannon. Ni Alan Turing. Sabi ni Alan Turing, pwede pala nating i-manipulate yung arithmetic using a calculator kagaya ng mechanical calculators or kagaya ng abacus. Pero paano mo i-manipulate yung language? Well, at least sa language, given all our expressions, we can manipulate mechanically, and in this case now, electrically, we can manipulate arguments. Maraming klase ng expressions ng humans, pero at least arguments, pwede na nating i-manipulate. And mind you, arguments are very basic to human knowledge. And sabi ni Alan Turing, in principle, but only in principle, we can build universal machines that can, kaya universal kasi hindi lang siya applicable sa arithmetic. Hindi natin hindi lang siya applicable sa arithmetic. Applicable din siya sa arguments. Applicable sa arguments, applicable sa arithmetic, kaya universal ang tawag. Now, reminding everybody, di ba, sabi nga ni Bertrand Russell, pwede mong i-unify ang mathematics on the basis of rules of inference. That's practically saying your arguments are reconcilable with your arithmetic. Well, Hindi lamang in principle kasi naipakita ni Claude Shannon na pwede ngang mangyari using circuit boards. Yan, but that's only in principle. Bakit? Kasi sinulat lang ni Alan Turing yan sa isang academic paper about universal machines and how it will work. But in the first place, mahal ang ano eh, mahal ang ah, mahal ang vacuum tubes, mahal nga ang mga radyo, gawa nga nung vacuum tubes among others, teacher lamang si Alan Turing. Nagkataon naman na nagkaroon ng World War II at nung World War II si Hitler may mga messages. Ang mga messages na encoded using the Enigma. Ito yung isang example na Enigma. Using the Enigma machine, na-encrypt ang lahat ng messages between General Rommel, who was preparing for the invasion of Europe, and Hitler, and they wanted to find out what are they talking about. But because apparently the Germans already knew the Allied forces were going to invade Europe. Pagka human ability ang gagamitin to decode, to decrypt the messages ni Hitler, pag isang message lang aabutin ng 200 taon. So, ang ginawa ng British government under the orders of Winston Churchill, ipinatawag si Alan Turing, given his universal machine theory, na magawa ng isang computer na magde-decode ng Enigma. At yung computer na yan, ang tawag doon sa computer na yan na finally ginawa ni Alan Turing ay si Christopher. Yan. And so for the first time in the 1940s, humankind nakaimbento ng digital computer. Unfortunately, by law sa England, if you have a project under the government that involves national security, that cannot be divulged anything about it in public for 50 years. And it is only 50 years after, in the 1990s, that everybody has come to know yung contribution ni Alan Turing. Kaya nung 1990s, nagkaroon ng sine. I recommend that you watch this movie, The Imitation Game. Panoodin niyo yan, that's a true story. At yan ang istorya kung paano yung universal machine theory ni Alan Turing nagamit to decode to decrypt mga messages ni Hitler. Thanks to the use of that computer, 12 million lives ang na-save according to one estimate. Ang si Alan Turing, ha? Galing, ano? Okay. Now, excuse me. So far, nasusundan ng kwento, ha? Sulat ko lang din ni Mr. Singson, ha? Please watch if you have opportunity. Imitation game. Not for the purposes of the class, but for purposes of general knowledge that I'm sure you will be using in your life as you go on with your lives in the future. Okay, balik tayo din eh. So, naimbento yung computer. Now, hindi natapos ang kwento dyan eh. So, 1940s, naimbento yung computer. Ngayon, 1950s. 1950s, sikat na computer. Actually, dalawa, let me explain pala, take note of the expression, sandali ha. Search nga natin, nakalimutan ko na yung pangalan eh. US Navy first computer ah, yun ENIAC. Okey, ito yung ENIAC, panoodin ninyo yung itsura, ha. This is ENIAC. ENIAC is the American version. Okey, ganito, until the 1990s nobody knew about Christopher. Bawal bawal pa alam, eh. And, fortunately for the Americans kasi ganito, gumawa sila nung 1940s, gumawa sila ng napakalalaking kanyon, artillery equipment. Pagputok nung artillery equipment, yung projectiles aabot ng 30 miles away from the cannon, gano'n kalayo. Ngayon, para malaman mo kung saan tatama yung projectile mo, gagawa ka ng calculation. Eh, ang calculator na ginagamit nun, ang tawag ay slide rule. May bilog na slide rule, may mahabang slide rule. Ako, inabot ko pa yan paggamit ng slide rule, eh. Which is very similar sa paggamit ng caliper measuring equipment. Now, sa madalit sabi, parang ganito, no? Yung canyon mo ng Navy, papuputukin mo, papunta ron sa isang direksyon. Pero hindi mo alam kung eksakto saan tatama. Ang gagawin mo, magpapadala ka ng quote-unquote intelligence personnel. Yung mga intelligence personnel may hawak na radyo, sasabihin, bandang kanan ng mga 1 kilometro, mali yung direksyon. Bandang kaliwa ng 500 meters o bandang kanan ng 200 meters hanggang sa tumama na yung eksakto yung tama ng kanyon. Gano'n ang nangyayari. Ay minsan hindi accurate. Kausap mo yung intelligence personnel mo, nasaan na? 500 meters pa, sige pa. Tapos mamaya kausap mo, nawala na yung kausap mo, putang ina, oy sumagot ka nga. Ay bakit? Eh, putang ina, tinamaan ng inyong kanyon. Kawawa naman. So, yung kanilang equipment kailangan ng accurate calculations. Sa madalit sabi, based on yung paper ni ano, ni Alan Turing, gumawa sila ng kanilang version ng computer. Mas nauna yung invention ni Alan Turing kaya lang sikreto. Yung invention ni Alan Turing, kung di ako nagkakamali, 1943 tapos na. Yung invention ng mga Amerikano, ginawa 1944, naging function na lang 1945 na. Ang pangalan nung sa mga Amerikano, ENIAC. Yung mga Amerikano, ang tawag nila sa computer ay computer. Ang tawag ng mga British sa computer ay Turing machine. Kaya lang the expression Turing machine hindi nauso kasi sikreto, eh. Kaya ang nauso ginagamit natin the American expression computer. Now, balik tayo dun sa computer. By the 1950s, yung computer sikat na, US version. Ngayon, ito yung sinabi ni Alan Turing. Sabi niya, kung di ako nagkakamali, sometime 1951. Sinabi niya in a paper, ganito. Sabi niya, given a graph na against time, t of 0 to t of n, going from past to future, and then comparing it to the 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 functionality of computer, sabi niya, mabilis yan aakyat. Sabi niya, pag ganun, magiging exponential. Sabi ni Alan Turing, dahil exponential, bakit? Kasi later, machines will be helped to use to invent better machines. Sa simula, yung tao lang ang nag-iimbento ng machines. But later, these machines in the form of computers will help humans to invent machines. And humans plus machines will be better, and the more you develop the machine, the more humans can develop better machines. Kaya magiging exponential eh. Ulitin natin. Human ka, nag-iimbento ka ng machine. Later, naka-imbento ka ng machine. Ulitin natin. Human, na-imbento ng machine. Later, naka-imbento ka ng machine that will help humans. Now, when humans and machines help together, then they have better machines. Better machines. If you have better machines, then you have humans, then you have better machines. And then you have humans, and then you have better, paket ng paket eh. Anyway, sinasabi ni Alan Turing, dadating ang panahon na magkakaroon tayo ng artificial intelligence. Ang tanong ay, paano mo malalaman if artificial intelligence yung kaharap mo? Paano mo malalaman if your machine is in fact artificially intelligent? How do you know that? Yan ang tanong. Okay? So, eto ngayon ang sagot. Yan. Gumawa si Turing na ang tawag natin Turing's test. Yan. Gumawa si Turing na ang tawag natin Turing's test. So, ang tanong ay, ito yung tanong paano mo malalaman kung yung machine na intelligent? Madali, kunin mo, pisil-pisilin mo, amoy-amoyin mo, tikman mo pa, ay puta na, intelligent ito. Hindi ganon. How do you know your machine is intelligent? Ergo, Turing's test. Yung Turing's test, simple lang. Kumuha ka ng 2 kwarto. One room, A, another room, B. In one of the rooms, you have a person. In one of the rooms, you have a machine. Yan. In one of the rooms, you have a machine. Okay. Ito ngayon ang problema natin, How do you know where the person is and where the machine is? You only know that the person is in either one of these and the machine is in either one of these. Now, what you need to do, you have to connect the person and the machine to a communication system. Yan. Nung unang panahon, ang tawag doon sa communication system, telex. Let me tell you about telex. Ano bang itsura ng telex? I-search natin. Telex machine. Ito yung mga bagong versions ng telex, But in fact, ang telex is what? Hanap tayo ng litrato ng telex na malaki. Ito yung sinaunang telex. Ito yung sinaunang telex, ha? Yan. Dali lang, ha? Anyway, ito yung telex, Yan. Yung telex, let me explain. Yung telex, is a typewriter combined with a telephone line that acts as a telegraph. So, what you do, you type your message, say your sentence, and it is sent through a telephone line to another telex machine. And then the signal is in the form of Morse code. But the Morse code is interpreted in terms of letters that are printed out on paper. So tayo ngayon nasa monitor, nag-type ka nasa monitor. Nung unang panahon, magta-type ka, lalabas dun sa paper. Lalabas yung papel. Yan, nag-chat-chat. That's actually a chat machine. Without using voice, you just chat. And as you chat, makikita niyo yung usapan dun sa paper. Now, sabi ni Alan Turing, pagka telepono, lugi yung machine kasi malalaman agad natin kung sinong tao at hindi. Kaya ang gagamitin, telex machine. Now, what you do, using the telex, you interview the person and you interview the machine. Ulitin natin na you interview the person and you interview the machine. And having interviewed them, and there is no limit to your interview, you then decide this is where the person is, or this is where the person is. And that's the game. Having now decided, you now open the door and find out if you're right or wrong. Now, ang sabi ni Alan Turing, through time, as you go along through time, yung level ng error, na yung functionality mo, interpreted in terms of error. In other words, tinatanong mo, yung machine at tinatanong mo yung tao kung ano-anong questions and then you decide. Sabi ni Alan Turing, given this kind of test, ngayong simula, nandito pa lang tayo, almost zero probability na magkaka-error ka. But as your machines become more sophisticated, then tumataas yung error mo. And tumataas. And sabi niya, at some point in time, the error will be 50%. You will be so fooled by the machine that you will think that it is a person. And 50% of the time, you will be fooled. By the time umabot na yan sa 50%, you can now, by definition, call that machine an artificially intelligent machine. Yan. By the time umabot sa 50%, you can call that machine artificially intelligent. Ano yung 50%? 50% error given Turing's test. Yan. Ngayon, ito yung tanong. Posible ba na a triangle can have more than 3 angles? Impossible. You cannot even imagine it. Posible ba that you can have some shape without any extension? Impossible. Mahirap ma-imagine ang shape na walang extension. Everything that has shape will have extension. Posible ba na what is true will also be false? Malabo, kaya nga tawag natin contradiction, confusing. So, the point is, impossible to have triangles with more than 3 angles. Now, this is the question ni Alan Turing. Impossible ba na merong 50% chance ng error in the future? Like saying it is impossible for triangles to have more than 3 angles. Sabi ni Alan Turing, in theory, hindi impossible yan. Sabi niya, in theory, that's not impossible. It's not like saying triangles can have more than 3 angles. To say that sometime in the future, machines can fool humans to make humans believe that the machines are humans themselves. It's not like saying triangles will have more than 3 angles. So, in theory, sinasabi ni Alan Turing, possible ang artificial intelligence. Yan ang argument niya. It's not like saying triangles have more than 3 angles. To say that at some point in the future, machines will be so sophisticated as to be able to fool humans and make them think that the machine is a human using Turing's test, sabi niya, in the future, pwedeng mangyari yan. Excuse me. Guess what? Nung lumabas ang paper ni Alan Turing, ulitin natin ha, pinakita ko ba sa inyo? Tama. Guess what? Nung lumabas ang paper ni Alan Turing, sa publication sa isang academic journal, both in the United States and Europe, maraming intellectuals, siguro mga geeks na walang girlfriend, magbabasa lagi ng mga journal. Maraming intellectuals na nagkita-kita. At nung nagkita-kita sila, nagkaroon sila ng workshop and conferences, and they were all talking about the possibility of artificial intelligence. And that's when we now have, beginning the 1950s, what we call the discipline of artificial intelligence. Now, let me clarify. Ang discipline ng artificial intelligence as an academic discipline nagsimula sa mga pilosopo. Philosophers ang unang members ng grupo ng artificial intelligence. Yung artificial intelligence later became a discipline in engineering. Pero originally sa philosophy lang kasi yung mga pilosopo pwedeng mag-speculate miski wala kang machine, mag-speculate ka lang, pwede na. Ito lang ginagamit. So, pero ngayon ganito nangyari. Ang nangyari nung una, kung ito yung artificial intelligence, AI, yung AI nung una, nandun sa loob ng philosophy. Yan. Sabihin na natin ito yung engineering, engineering as a science. Kaso, as time has gone by from the 1950s, so sabi natin, ito yung artificial intelligence, originally nandun sa philosophy. Ngayon, ang artificial intelligence nandito na. Mas marami na nag-aaral ng artificial intelligence na engineer kaysa philosopher. Yun ang nangyari. But, punta tayo din Saan? Sa kay GPT-3. Pag may time kayo, basahin nyo ito. At manood kayo sa YouTube noong tungkol kay GPT-3. Yan. Si GPT-3 ay isang example ng system na nakakaloko ng tao. Pwede niyong kausapin miski kayo mismo, literally, find out how you can do that. GPT-3. Ito, GPT-3 interview. Maraming makikita kayo dyan Marami kayong makikita dyan merong
GPT-3 is here with us. So let's get to it. First of all, thank you for interviewing with us today.
So, ang gusto nating sabihin, kung may time kayo, gawin ninyo. But the point is, we call this age today the age of information communication technology, and the highlight of information communication technology is artificial intelligence. And the highlight of artificial intelligence is artificial general intelligence. Artificial intelligence is developed to make specific functions at to do specific functions. Halimbawa, artificial intelligence that can autofocus, or artificial intelligence that can translate from English to Nihongo. Pero pag sinabi nyo artificial general intelligence, that's like human intelligence. Kaya general, kasi that intelligence can be used on so many functions, including conversations. And what I'm telling you now is that today we already have the primordial, simula pa lang, the primordial form of artificial general intelligence. GPT-3 is one example, and there are more sophisticated artificial general intelligence available that are now, for example, being used by Google. Ang plano ng Google is to have 100 million. Let me repeat. Ang plano ng Google is to have 100 million. 100 million supercomputers put together in the future. And with 100 million supercomputers put together in the future, you will have a very sophisticated form of artificial general intelligence. Yan. And hindi posible yan kung hindi nagkaroon ng circuit boards. Anong halimbawa natin ng circuit board? Okay. Ito na lang. Remember, may circuit boards na tayo ngayon, ano? Now, ang circuit boards, this is one example of a circuit board. This is a motherboard of a computer. This is the motherboard of a computer. Now, see all those lines? Those lines are lines ng ano? Lines ng Tree Tableaux. Noong 1971, ang single thumbnail microchip could contain 100, tuwa na kami noon, 100 vacuum tubes, the equivalent of 100 100 transistors. Kasi yung vacuum tube, ganito kalalaki yun eh. Hindi na mapaliit, pinaliit nila in the form of transistors, ganito kalalaki. Then transistors became microtransistors. Now, yung transistors, kayang maglaman ng 100 transistors sa isang thumbnail. Pero hindi na uso yun. In a thumbnail size of a microchip, you can put tens of billions, let me repeat, tens of billions of equivalent of transistors, equivalent of vacuum tubes. And we're even going further than that. But all of that is dependent on the original circuit board, which is dependent on the original Tree Tableaux, which is dependent on your natural deduction and your shortcut method, and all the way to Bertrand Russell and Gottlob Frege's truth table. Ganyan lang kasimple. The universe looks very sophisticated, but you can cut it down into its basic components, your subatomic particles. The same with human intelligence, as you will see later. Maraming salamat po. Naubusan na tayo ng oras. I only have 1 minute. Ingat lagi, ha? If you have time, panoodin nyo dun sa YouTube yung primordial form ng artificial general intelligence in the case ni GPT-3. Ingat po lagi. Maligayang araw. Gandang umaga.